We talk about self-care on this show a lot, and one of the ways I'm able to better take care of myself is by finding ways to create more time, and I do that by knowing when to delegate. My assistant turned manager, Brandy, who has her own episode, by the way, it's number 53, knows all about that. The number one rule to delegating is knowing what absolutely needs to be created by you, and then knowing which things someone else might be better at, or which things someone else can do easily. And when I need something done outside of my and Brandy's scope, I use Fiverr. Fiverr.com is a super cool professional marketplace where you can find contractors all over the world to help you do the little things that you need help with, or that require a special skill set like creating podcast cover art. I use Fiverr for that all the time, and I've always been happy with the work. And each virtual professional on Fiverr also has comments and rankings so you can see who is consistently providing great work. It's a really wonderful solution to buy back some of my time and get the stuff done that I need to move forward on a project. If you're needing some more time in your schedule, I highly recommend finding ways to delegate and maybe finding your own virtual assistant, like mine was Brandy, who's now a manager, or copywriting, or maybe podcast cover art, or anything else that you might need that you should be delegating. I have my very own Fiverr link in the show notes that will take you right to it. So take a breath, click the link in the show notes, and spend that extra time for yourself.
Focus on what you're creating, how you're creating it, how is it compelling. And Barcy, I think you're a great example of this. You really focus on quality production. You really focus on what the content is. And I think you're a good example of what needs to be done out there with podcasting. A lot of shows start, they produce a couple of episodes, just like you said, podfade, because they didn't really have a plan. They didn't really have an idea of what they were going to do. They maybe ran out of things to talk about because they weren't doing something that was really part of their core of who they are, and what their career is, what their goal is, what their brand is, what the company is that they're trying to do it for. It just wasn't aligned to keep it something that was worth doing. I think that's the number one thing.
It all begins by understanding the mind.
I want to be happy now. I don't care about the future. I want to be happy right now.
You are not alone. You are never, ever, ever alone in this.
It's helped my voice grow and given me freedom to be creative on my own.
I'm Christina Barcy. Welcome to Be Bold, Begin, a podcast dedicated to you, the creative, the healer, and the innovator. The topics and conversations we have here are designed to help you discover what might be getting in your way and offer you tools, techniques, and guidance to move through them.
I live in the imposter's body more than I live in my own body. I don't have to feel like I don't deserve this.
This is where creativity and healing intersect.
If you decide to be bold and begin, you have the opportunity to feel humbled and empowered. I totally believe that.
I'm a certified Kaizen Muse creativity coach, a certified Reiki energy healer, and an entrepreneur, artist, and presenter. I will share with you my experiences, my proven tools and techniques that helped me and my clients and loved ones shift and expand in the areas they most desired. This is a gentle and open space where you will hear how others are being bold to encourage you to begin your own journey or expand the one you're on. This is Be Bold Begin. Hey there, this is Barcy, the host of Be Bold Begin. We have our guest, Rob Greenlee, the VP of Content and Partnerships at Libsyn, a podcast hosting platform. In fact, the hosting platform I use to host and distribute this show and a handful of my clients. And in today's episode, we are focusing on what you need to know before you begin your podcast with a few bonus drops of knowledge from Rob. Enjoy. So, there's a lot of talk about how difficult it is to stand out as a podcaster these days. Not like when you were starting and there was just 12 of you. But and there's a lot of talk about pod fading, which for those of you who don't know, that basically means you're losing steam and you want to quit your show if you have a show. So can you just share with us why someone should podcast and how it can be an asset to themselves and others.
Mm-hmm. I think the first thing you have to think about is why you're podcasting and what your goals might be with doing so. And I think focusing on, especially at the beginning, focusing on what you want to do and what your topic area that actually inspires you and keeps you motivated, gets you excited, I think is something to seriously consider. I know many new podcasters are trying to create the next serial or something like that, or the next podcast that's going to be the breakout hit that's going to earn them $1 million or something like that. That can also be accomplished. That takes a lot of planning and goal setting as well, and trying to get an understanding of who your audience is, how you produce the content. Those are two very important steps in the process. But if you're just an indie producer that wants to produce a show very simply, I would just really focus on what you love to talk about. What is your expertise? What do you get up in the morning and the first thing you pull up on your iPhone or your Android device to read about? What is that thing that sets you on fire? And the reason I say that is more about creating regular content, because if you're a podcaster, what you need to do is create content on a regular basis. Generally, just focus on what you're creating, how you're creating it, how is it compelling. And I think more and more audio quality is important. And Barcy, I think you're a great example of this. You really focus on quality production. You really focus on what the content is. And I think you're a good example of what needs to be done out there with podcasting. And I think you will also probably admit that it's not easy to create a show that people want to listen to. And that's where the rubber hits the road on this. A lot of shows start, they produce a couple of episodes, just like you said, podfade, because they didn't really have a plan. They didn't really have an idea of what they were going to do. They maybe ran out of things to talk about because they weren't doing something that was really part of their core of who they are, and what their career is, what their goal is, what their brand is, what the company is that they're trying to do it for, or what the consulting services that they're trying to offer. It just wasn't aligned to keep it something that was worth doing. So I think that's the number one thing. And then take that, whatever that is, and create a kind of like a keyword strategy behind it too. What are the keywords that will drive attention to whatever that topic is? And then that's what you build your marketing around, whether it be search engines, whether it be your metadata, whether it be your show titles, whether it be your artwork. All these things are important for audiences to discover your content and have it be something that they see and they connect with right away.
It is complicated, but what I'm hearing is know what you're talking about, be passionate about it, make sure it's something that you are in love with so that other people know how to fall in love with it, and have a plan.
Right.
It's knowing enough about what you want to say and why. The why, I think, is really important. I talk about that in almost every time I present. I bake it in because it starts there. And if you forget, because it might change as you grow, then it's time to look at it again and go, well, why am I getting up to do this now? Maybe it's changed. Yeah. And is there still value to give, or do I need to stop and start the next why? And that's okay too. It's totally fine to end a show and start another one.
I would say that's going to be your experience. What you start with, whatever your idea is. I'm not saying that you have to write up this extensive business plan for your podcast. What I'm saying is just get a concept together that has some cohesion to it, that makes sense to you and makes sense to someone else. And then start building on that, based on that concept. And what you'll find is that you will get more input on that as you build it out. And as you launch shows, you will learn from what you see in the market, what you see with your audience reaction to the content, and you evolve the show, you evolve the marketing message to be more precise to who you're trying to reach.
Yes, leave room to grow from that starting point too, because it can be so overwhelming to start a new thing.
Yeah,
but
it can.
Some planning. I wish I did more planning at the beginning of a lot of things I'd started in the past. So I do really emphasize just a little bit of planning. Plan your first 10 episodes.
I mean, it can be just something that you write on a napkin.
For
It doesn't
sure.
have to be this big thing.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
But also keep in mind what you have to invest, and don't overinvest. I think you can start podcasting for, pretty low amount of money these days.
Yes.
Probably. I think there is some investment that you need to make into the infrastructure of doing it.
Agreed. Definitely know what your budget is. Even if it's $10 a week, if that's your budget, then know that that's your budget. And then ask yourself, what can I do for $10 a week? And do I just start by buying a microphone? And then that's my one investment this month. And then I'll just do some more planning until my next $40 comes around. Like, just know what it is to help you understand what steps you can take. And then that being said, on the creative side, if you're like, okay, I have no money, which has been my case many times with projects I wanted to start, but the idea I felt was still there. The next question is, how can I adjust the content to fit the box, the parameters, the barriers? And if it means you start on an app where you're talking on your really expensive cell phone that has good audio, and those are your first 10 episodes, you can do that.
Yeah.
And then upgrade later. Just make sure that your infrastructure is good. Like, you own your RSS feed. Own your RSS feed. That's the one thing I'll say to things like that. There's a lot of tools out there now to be aware of, but that's something I want to point out too.
And also kind of take a little bit of a contrary perspective on this to some degree. If you look at the podcasting medium today, there's only about 600,000 shows that are active out of 3.8 million. So don't feel like if you start something and it just doesn't align with what you're wanting to do, it's okay to shut it down.
Yeah.
Don't be caught up in, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it for the next 2 years, and it's going to work no matter what I do. Just be conscious of the fact that maybe some idea that you had just doesn't work and doesn't align with who you are and what you want to do with your goals. And it's okay to adjust and start something new if you need to. And the whole pod fading thing kind of gets a bad rap, but in some ways, even getting started with something like that, you're going to learn a lot.
Yes.
Right? So even producing 3 or 4 episodes that don't go anywhere, that don't get anybody listening to, don't get discouraged from that. Learn from it.
Yes.
And then adjust your sails and do something new.
I completely agree. Have a little bit of a plan, which includes the budget and knowing a few things, and know your why. And know that why has to be connected to your joy. Don't do it painfully the whole way. There's no need to do that. You just don't do that. If you hate it, don't do it.
Right.
Then stop, pause, figure out what's wrong.
Well, because it's not going to sound very good if you hate doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Your audience is going to pick that up. They're going to say,
we're going to hear it.
This person isn't really into this.
So the last thing I'll ask you is, I feel like we kind of went through a checklist already, but do you have something very basic? Like what do you think are the first 5 things someone needs to do?
Well, I would say that the first one is what we just talked about. I would say the getting of a microphone is probably a little bit further down the list. I would get other stuff together of what you need, the branding of the show, the artwork, all this kind of stuff. The microphone part of it is like nuts and bolts, right? I mean, it's you can get an ATR 2100X, or you can get a Samsung Q2U for less than $100 and plug it into your laptop or your computer or your Mac or whatever, and you're basically good to go. Then it's just a matter of getting some recording software that you need, and you can use Audacity, which is free, or there's a variety of other software applications out there. I use a software platform that's pretty inexpensive called SoundForge. It's made by Sony. And then I also use a leveling software called Levelator that's free. So you basically record your podcast. Maybe you do some editing. Maybe you do some cutting and pasting of segments into it, and then you run it through. You run the wave through the Levelator software that's free, and it basically levels all of the segments of your show into one audio, and it raises the volume to a point where it can be heard on a bus, train, any kind of listening environment. Because that's the other thing you have to think about too, is that people listen to podcasts in very noisy environments. So your audio needs to be at a volume that doesn't require them to max their iPhone volume setting, or to have the other worst thing happen is that your volume is all over the place and they're having to ride the volume up and down on their iPhone because it's blowing your ears out or they can't hear it. So that's a very important kind of tactical thing. I don't know that a lot of podcasters think about that, but it's an important factor that has been important in my experience, and I try and always drive that message.
Sound quality, yeah, for sure. So the checklist would be what we just said: understanding what you're going to talk about, knowing the why, and understanding some organization. So let's say that's the second. Right. What's the third most important thing for you?
I would say the actual laying out the episode that you have, and then also planning what the content is more precisely, creating an outline, getting in your thoughts what your keywords that you're going to focus on with whatever content that you're producing. Those are all kind of like building blocks for what comes later, which is the actual publishing of the episode. So, as you come up with your content that you're producing, keep in mind what audiences are maybe looking for, what keywords are they looking to search for in Google. You also need to create artwork for your podcast too. It's square artwork, 3,000 by 3,000 pixels is the preferred size with Apple. Then get a podcast hosting platform.
Like Libsyn.
Well, like Libsyn, there's a bunch of them out there that you can pick from. Go through as many of them as you want to look at. Look at their features, look at their pricing, look at their packages that they have to offer, and pick one that best fits with what you like and what you prefer.
I actually have clickable links in the podcast resource guide that I created a couple of months ago that you can actually click on all of these platforms, hosting platforms. You can browse them and see what you like there. And same thing with the artwork parameters. Those are listed there as well, so you don't have to go searching for them.
Also, submitting to listening platforms is the other thing. So once you've published an episode, actually what you should do is launch a trailer episode first before you publish a first full episode, which needs to be at least 1 minute long. And the reason for the minimum of 1 minute long is that the IAB certification specifications for counting a download, it has to deliver at least 1 minute of audio before it's even counted. So if it's shorter than a minute, it won't even count in many of the hosting platforms.
That's really good to know. That I did not know. Well, thanks again, Rob. Thanks for doing this for our Podcast Curious community.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to Be Bold Begin. We hope that these episodes are helping inspire and empower you to take your next steps towards whatever you're thinking of creating. And if starting a podcast is what you're thinking of creating, then I would love to have you in my brand new private Facebook group, Unleash Your Podcast Niche, a podcast learning community for the aspiring podcaster who cares about creating an authentic message and making an impact with podcasting. Join us for live opportunities with me and meet other creatives like you who are at the same stage. There's a link in the show notes to join us. Happy creating.